This is a brief video for Australia's human rights lawyers or anyone interested in human rights law. G'day, my name is Charles Mackenzie and I'm the President of Infected Blood Australia. Our organisation represents victims of Australia's contaminated blood disaster and the failures that happened with our blood supply, with patients in the thousands becoming infected with things like hepatitis C from contaminated blood transfusions in the years before 2000s. Or what about Australians with the bleeding disorder haemophilia, 1,750 of whom acquired HIV and hepatitis C in what is internationally recognised as the worst treatment disaster in global history. And on that point, actually, right now in the United Kingdom, they're having their largest ever public inquiry. I'm actually a witness in that inquiry, and I'm represented by some excellent British humanitarian lawyers, which leads me to this question. Why is it that Australian contaminated blood victims and haemophilia families can get no representation, legal representation here in Australia from humanitarian lawyers? For decades now, they've been unrepresented. Whereas if you go to Canada, whereas if you go to the UK, they've had representation, and wonderful representation like my lawyers who represent me, Watkins and Gunn in the UK, have helped force this UK infected blood inquiry. And also with the good work of lawyers and activists, now the British government is expected to make the biggest settlement in British history, or at least one of them. It really is a remarkable turn of events for contaminated blood victims who've gone without help for so many decades. Now that the law has established that all that could have been done wasn't done, and that authorities knew that the blood supply was contaminated and didn't do enough to warn patients. The exact same failures happened here in Australia. We've got people who've lost family homes, we've got children who lost parents, people living in public housing, really great careers ruined, and abject poverty right throughout our group. Why can't Australians get representation? You know, I've had a lot to do with the British and activists and lawyers dealing with this remarkable and very important infected blood inquiry in the UK. And they have been rather surprised that we can't, or haemophiliacs and haemophilia families, victims of Australia's greatest medical disaster, can't get representation. There are no services for our haemophilia families. There's no counselling. There's no counselling for contaminated blood victims. Imagine you went into one hospital hoping to have a baby, or you were having elective surgery, or you were a child with a bleeding disorder, and that's it. Now the rest of your life you're disabled and perhaps crippled and chronically disadvantaged by HIV or hepatitis C or both viruses. That's what's in our group. So we'd like to talk to you about how you might like to help us and help us wave the Aussie flag. Contaminated blood was a global scandal. And yet Australians who are very much part of it, remember these medicines, things like Factor VIII, which were used by haemophiliacs and are found to be flawed in countries like Canada and now in the UK, the exact same medicines were used here, okay? Billions of pounds is going to be offered by the British government to British victims. Now, as much as governments would like to make this all about money, this isn't. This is a human tragedy. It's the story, especially in Australia, it's the story of how so many people, men, women and children, went into hospital or took a treatment like a haemophilia treatment, many of whom didn't even need it to survive. And they were persuaded to take a treatment they didn't need, and they've had their whole lives ruined and they can't get any help or any answers. We want to change that. So please help us wave the Aussie flag for Australian victims of this global contaminated blood scandal. And I'll be very happy to speak to you. My name is Charles Mackenzie. As I say, I'm the President of Infected Blood Australia, and we're waiting for representation for Australian victims of the global contaminated blood scandal. Thank you. Hope to hear from you soon.